Every Friday, my parents left me at Grandma Vera's apartment. She lived alone on the fourth floor of an old building in St. Petersburg. The hallway always smelled like boiled cabbage and something metallic, like rust or blood. I never liked it, but my parents said she got lonely, and I was her only grandchild. Grandma was always polite, but strange. She had this stiff smile that didn't move her eyes. She cooked too much food, spoke too softly, and always wore gloves, even inside. Her apartment was filled with knitted blankets and sweaters stacked neatly in piles. Each one had a tag sewn on it with a name, usually a neighbor's name. The first time I asked her about it, she said she liked knitting gifts. But then I realized some of those neighbors hadn't been around lately. I didn't see Miss Ivanova watering her plants anymore, or Mr. Petrov walking his dog. When I asked Granny where they went, she just said, "They moved away, darling." By my sixth visit, there was at least 10 new blankets, each one different colors, different patterns. I noticed one folded on the couch that had a dark stain near the corner. When I touched it, it felt stiff. She quickly took it from my hands and said it was an old one. I didn't believe her. That night, while we had dinner, Grandma talked about people leaving the building. She said she missed having company. Then she looked at me for a long time and smiled. I tried to change the subject, but she asked if I liked the red sweater she made for me. I hadn't even noticed it hanging by the door. My name was stitched on the front in perfect cursive. I asked when she made it. She said she stayed up late the night before. I didn't remember her being awake when I went to bed, but maybe I hadn't noticed. Before going to sleep, I walked past her sewing room. The door was slightly open. Inside, I saw her working on something big, her hands moving slowly. I could hear the soft click of the knitting needles. I stepped closer and noticed the yarn glistened under the lamp. It was wet. I froze. A drop fell to the floor. It was dark red. She turned her head, just a little, enough for me to see her eyes. They looked dead, flat, like she wasn't even human for that second. I went back to bed without a sound. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a faint tapping sound. It came from her sewing room again. I sat on the bed, heart pounding, and listened. The tapping turned into scraping, like metal dragging on tile. Then I heard a humming, a quiet lullaby. For almost 5 minutes, I tried to convince myself to stay in bed, but the noises grew louder, like she was struggling with something heavy. I had to know. I got up, stepped into the hallway, and walked toward the room. When I reached the door, I looked through the crack. Grandma was sitting at her table, knitting with long silver needles, but her hands were shaking. The thread ran down to a bucket beside her. I could see something moving inside it. I stepped closer, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. Then I realized the thread wasn't yarn. It was a long strip of skin. I gasped before I could stop myself. The chair screeched as she stood up. Her head turned sharply toward the door.
"Who's there?"
I ran. I didn't even think. I bolted down the hallway, opened the first door I saw, and threw myself inside. The basement stairs creaked as I went down 2 at a time. My legs were shaking so hard I nearly fell. At the bottom, I fumbled for the light switch. When the bulb flickered on, my stomach dropped. There was a body on the table, fresh, still bleeding. A man's head wrapped in cloth, the rest stripped and half sewn, like she was turning him into something. I backed away, pressing against the wall, covering my mouth to stop a scream. The smell was unbearable, rot and iron. My vision blurred for a second. I thought I was going to pass out. Then I heard footsteps above me, slow, deliberate. She was searching. The floorboards creaked with every step she took.
"Where are you, sweetheart?"
I stayed completely still, not even breathing. The light flickered. I looked around, searching for a hiding spot. There was an old wardrobe in the corner. I ran and climbed inside, closing the door just enough to peek through the crack. The basement door opened. I saw her silhouette at the top of the stairs, holding one of those long knitting needles. It gleamed in the light. She started walking down, humming again. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. The humming stopped. She stood in the middle of the room, sniffing the air like an animal. Then she smiled.
I know you saw him. It's okay, but weren't supposed to.
She dragged the needle across the table, tracing the edge of the corpse.
He is just sleeping. He is very ill, so he took a nap. Want to see it? He is even snoring.
Her voice cracked when she said that. Then she looked right at the wardrobe. My throat tightened. She took one step toward me. Then something fell upstairs. A loud crash. She froze, looked up, and hurried back to the main floor. The door slammed. I waited almost a full minute before moving. I opened the wardrobe slowly, stepped out, and tried to breathe quietly. I needed to leave. I went upstairs trying to make no noise. The hallway was empty. I saw the front door and ran to it, but when I tried the handle, it didn't move. Locked. The key was gone. I looked around, panicking. The apartment was silent now. Too silent. Then I saw her shadow moving in the kitchen doorway.
You shouldn't play games with me, darling. Even Grandma can lose her patience.
I ducked behind the couch. Her steps were faster now, uneven, angry. She threw open drawers, slammed doors, muttering under her breath. I crawled toward the hallway, trying to stay low. When I reached the small table by the entrance, I saw the keys hanging there. I went straight to the door. I inserted the keys and opened the door, but before I could leave, something cold touched the back of my neck.
Going somewhere?
Suddenly, a cloth pressed over my face. The smell hit instantly. Sweet, chemical, heavy. I struggled, clawing at her arm, but everything went dark. I woke up in my bed. Sunlight was coming through the curtains. My parents were standing near the window, talking to Grandma. She looked calm, smiling, serving them tea. I sat up fast. My head was pounding. The sweater she made me was folded neatly on the blanket. My name stitched perfectly across the chest. I screamed, told them what she did, about the body in the basement, the blood, the thread, everything. My parents stared at me, then looked at her. She laughed, a small, dry laugh that didn't sound real.
Oh, poor thing. He's always had such an imagination.
I yelled again, begged them to check the basement. My father sighed and opened the door, motioning for me to show him. I ran downstairs, my chest tight with fear and anger. The basement was empty. The table was clean, the floor washed. No blood, no smell, nothing. She followed us down, still smiling. I lost. We left that afternoon. My mother hugged her goodbye like nothing happened. On the way home, no one spoke to me. Grandma died 3 years later. Heart failure. When they cleaned her apartment, the police found a locked trunk under her bed. Inside were 24 sweaters, each folded perfectly, each with a name stitched on it. One of them had mine. No one ever figured out what happened to the missing neighbors. The case was closed without answers. But sometimes I dream about her sitting in that chair again, humming, knitting with that same bloody thread. And in the dream, she always stops, looks up, and says my name. This story is based on the real-life crimes of Tamara Sanzanova, known in Russia as the Granny Reaper. Between 2000 and 2015, she was suspected of killing and dismembering several of her neighbors and tenants in St. Petersburg. Authorities found detailed diary entries in her home, describing the murders along with evidence linking her to multiple disappearances in her building. What shocked investigators most was how ordinary her life appeared on the surface. She kept her apartment clean, smiled to neighbors, and spent her days knitting and shopping for groceries. Behind that routine, She stored human remains in her home and used kitchen tools to dismember her victims.
I was 16 when my parents decided to move back into my grandmother's house. She lived alone after my grandfather died, and lately she'd started forgetting things. Some days she left the stove on. Other days she called my dad by my uncle's name, who had been dead for 10 years. Still, she didn't want to leave her home, and my parents said it would be temporary. The house wasn't huge, but it had too many rooms for just 4 people. The kind of place that still smelled like old perfume and dust, like time had stopped somewhere in the 70s. The clocks all ticked, but none of them showed the right hour. Except one, the big wall clock in the dining room. My grandmother said she trusted that one because it was never wrong. The first week was fine. She talked to herself sometimes, muttering while stirring her tea or watching TV, but I ignored it. I thought that's what being old looked like. What bothered me the most was the way she looked at that clock every night before going to bed, like she was waiting for something. The first time I asked about it, she smiled, almost proud, and said,
"If I sleep before the minute hand passes, she'll call me, and I'm not ready to go."
At first, we all laughed it off. My mom said old people have strange superstitions. My dad just turned up the TV volume, but every night my grandmother would sit on the same chair in front of the dining room clock, her eyes fixed on the second hand, whispering under her breath. She'd wait until exactly 3:17 a.m., then quietly go to bed. The third night I couldn't sleep, so I went to get some water. I saw her silhouette sitting there, still as stone. I called her name, but she didn't react. Her breathing was slow, almost mechanical. The tick of the clock filled the whole room. When the minute hand reached the mark, she blinked once, stood up, and left without a word. It started to bother me more after that. During the day, she'd talk like everything was normal, but at night she'd whisper things that made no sense. Once I caught her talking to the reflection of the window as if someone was standing outside.
"I can't keep her waiting too long. She gets angry when I'm late."
I told my parents, but they said it was just confusion, maybe dementia. They told me not to scare her, but I wasn't sure who was scaring who anymore. A week later, I decided I wanted to see what really happened at 3:17. I stayed in bed with the lights off, listening to every sound the house made. At 3 sharp, I heard her door creak open. Her steps were slow, dragging, the soft tap of slippers on the old wooden floor. My heart started pounding so loud I was afraid she'd hear it. She walked toward the dining room, and a faint light came from under the door. I waited a minute, then got up and followed her. The dining room light was on, just like always. She sat there, facing the clock. Only this time, she wasn't alone. The chair opposite hers was pulled out slightly as if someone had been sitting there. I froze by the door, trying not to make a sound. She smiled at the empty seat.
"You're early tonight."
The clock ticked, louder and louder, until I couldn't tell if it was real or just inside my head. I wanted to back away, but my foot hit the edge of a chair. The sound echoed across the room. My grandmother turned around slowly. Her eyes looked pale, unfocused, but her smile stayed frozen in place. She stood up, and her movements were stiff, unnatural, like her joints didn't work the same way anymore. I whispered her name, but her voice wasn't hers when she spoke back.
"She's not here right now. You shouldn't be awake."
It was her mouth, but it wasn't her voice. The tone was deeper, dry, like someone else was speaking through her. I stepped back, but she started walking toward me. Each step sounded heavier than the last.
"Go to bed, child. I'm here for her, not for you."
Her eyes flicked to the clock. The second hand trembled on the 17. I reached for the light switch, but before I could touch it, she was really close to me. I froze, not from fear, but because I didn't know what to do. She grabbed the dining table and threw it like it was cardboard. It slammed against the wall, exploded into pieces. I stumbled back, frozen. She was on me before I could blink. Her hand swung across my face, and the hit was so hard that I hit the floor instantly. My ear rang, my mouth filled with blood. She leaned down close, her breath hot and trembling.
See? Now you can't leave.
I crawled backward, and she laughed. High, broken laughter, like something inside her had snapped for good. I ran. She followed, screaming my name in a voice I'd never heard before. Objects flew, chairs, frames, glass. She was everywhere, faster than she should have been. I locked myself in the bathroom, pushing the door with my whole body. She hit it, again and again, yelling words I didn't understand. The wood cracked. Then silence. I stayed still, breathing through my hand to keep quiet. After a few seconds, I heard my parents shouting from the other side. I opened the door. The hallway was destroyed. She was gone. Through the window, I saw her, sprinting into the yard, barefoot, her hair whipping around her face. She looked back once, grinning. Then she vanished into the dark. A few minutes later, while the police were coming, the house was silent, except for the broken clock still ticking in the dining room. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table. They looked pale, like they hadn't slept in days. My dad spoke first. He told me my grandmother had suffered from dissociative identity disorder for years, long before I was born. She'd been stable for a long time, but recently she stopped taking her medication without telling anyone. They thought she was fine. She wasn't. He said that when she stopped taking her pills, she began talking to the lady again, the same one she used to see during her worst episodes. My mom said they hadn't wanted to worry me, that they thought she was just confused because of her age. Everything made sense then. The voice, the strength, the way she changed completely. It wasn't my grandmother who hit me. It was whoever she became when she stopped fighting that other part of her. They searched for her all night, but she never came back. Not that night, not ever again. Every other day, I had to visit my grandma. Mom said she needed company, and since she didn't trust nurses, I was the one who had to check on her. Grandma Evelyn was independent, stubborn, and always left her door unlocked. She used to say,
"If someone wants to steal from me, they'll only get expired pills and cat food."
That Thursday was no different. I took the bus, went up to the 4th floor, and expected to find her reading the newspaper in her armchair. But when I turned the handle, the door didn't move. Locked. That never happened. I knocked softly first, then louder. Nothing. The hallway was quiet except for the flickering light at the end of it. I called her name. No answer. The TV wasn't on. The cat wasn't meowing, and there wasn't a single sound from inside. My stomach tightened. Something was wrong, but I couldn't tell what. I pulled out my phone to call her. She didn't pick up. Then, as I was about to dial my mom, my phone vibrated. It was Grandma. Her voice was rough when I answered. She barely spoke.
Honey, I'm sorry. I fell asleep. My throat hurts. can't talk much. I left the spare key under the mat. I hesitated. Grandma never locked the door, and leaving a key under the mat wasn't something she'd ever done. Still, her voice sounded weak, old, exhausted. I told her I'd come in quietly and let her rest. She just muttered something I didn't understand and hung up. I crouched down, lifted the mat, and there it was, a small brass key. My fingers shook a little as I picked it up. I told myself she was fine, just sick. But as I put the key into the lock, the silence in that hallway felt heavier, thicker. I didn't even know why I was whispering when I said, "Grandma, I'm coming in." The door creaked open. The air inside was still, stale. The TV was off and her favorite lamp flickered weakly, like it hadn't been turned on in days. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me. Then I heard it. A voice calling my name. Low and rough, coming from her bedroom. The voice sounded painful, like she was forcing it through a throat full of gravel. I walked toward the sound. Every step made the floor groan, and for some reason, I kept looking over my shoulder, as if expecting someone to be standing there. The door to her bedroom was half closed. I pushed it open, saw her sitting on the edge of the bed, facing the window. Her back was turned to me, and a blanket covered most of her head. "Grandma, are you okay?" No answer. Her breathing was uneven, almost like a growl. I took another step closer. She flinched slightly when I spoke again. "Do you need me to call Mom?" Then that same raspy voice said,
"No, sweetheart. Just go home. Come back later."
For a moment I almost laughed. It didn't sound like her. Not really. It was too deep, too forced, like someone pretending to sound sick. I said she was being dramatic, told her I'd make her a cup of tea or soup. She didn't move, didn't even look at me. That's when I noticed something on the floor, under the bed. A shape. At first I thought it was her cat, but when I bent down to take a closer look, I saw fingers. Pale fingers. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. The nails were chipped, the skin grayish. The hand was motionless. I stared at it, frozen, trying to make sense of it. Then I looked up. The person on the bed was still sitting there, still facing away from me. My chest tightened. I stood up slowly, taking a step back. "Grandma?" The person on the bed twitched, then turned slightly, just enough for me to see part of a face. Rubbery, pale, with a badly fitted wig sliding down the forehead. It wasn't my grandmother. It was a man, young, maybe 30, wearing her nightgown and a mask made from what looked like latex and makeup. Before I could scream, he stood up abruptly, pulling the blanket off his shoulders. His voice was low, shaking.
"Don't go yet. You just got here."
He smiled, but the smile didn't match the rest of his face. The latex cracked near his cheek. I ran. I sprinted for the front door, but he was faster. Somehow he was already there, standing in front of it, still in that half-ruined disguise. He was taller than I expected, but he stood hunched, still pretending to be fragile.
"Sit down, sweetheart. Let's have some tea first."
I shouted at him to move, tried to push him aside, but his hands grabbed my arms, cold and trembling. He didn't squeeze hard. He didn't need to. I couldn't even move. He walked me back toward the kitchen like I was a lost child. The table was already set. 2 cups, sugar, milk, steam still rising from the teapot. That moment lasted too long. The ticking of the clock, the slow scraping of his chair as he sat down. I stayed standing, my back against the wall. He poured tea for both of us, spilling a bit over the edge.
"You're a good girl for visiting your grandma."
The mask shifted when he spoke. His voice cracked, sometimes high, sometimes low, as if he couldn't decide what tone to use. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He stirred his tea, then pushed a cup toward me.
"Drink. It's rude to waste tea."
The smell of it was wrong, metallic like rust and dirt. I didn't move. His hand twitched, and for the first time, I saw his eyes through the slit in the mask. Empty, wide, shaking with something that wasn't entirely anger or madness, just absence. Minutes passed. He drank his tea, still pretending to be gentle, pretending to be her. He even asked me about school, about Mom, about the cat. I just nodded. My voice wouldn't come out. When he finished his cup, he stood up and fixed the wig on his head.
"See? Nothing to be scared of. You can go now."
I didn't believe him, but I left. I ran out of that apartment and didn't look back. I came back an hour later with 2 police officers and Mom. I kept telling them he was still there, that there was someone pretending to be Grandma. The officers kicked the door open and entered first. The lights were still on, the tea still on the table. The man was gone. Every room was empty. The drawers were open, the bed undone, the window wide. But the smell of old blood and mold, was impossible to ignore. I walked into the kitchen. The chairs were still facing each other. The officers were checking the rooms when I saw it. A figure sitting at the table, slumped forward, gray and silent. Grandma. She was dressed the same way he had been. Nightgown, wig, slippers. Her eyes half open, mouth stiff. The teacup was still in her hand. The other chair, the one I had refused to sit in, was empty. The man had placed her there before leaving, like she'd hosted that tea party herself. No one ever captured that man. No one knows who he was or how he entered the building. The only thing I know is that he took my granny, and I'll never see her again.